Well, hello and welcome to Automation Answers, a new podcast brought to you by myself, Isaac Griffith, the host, where I'll be interviewing leaders from the robotics, automation, AI, intralogistics and automated warehousing world. Today, I am up in sunny Doncaster, or rainy Doncaster, visiting the new Next E3 warehouse. Brought to me is none other than Matt Winter, the head of engineering at Next UK. So, firstly, Matt, thanks for having you on. Appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. How are things? How's it been so far in the world of automation?
Yeah, pretty good. There's a lot going on. Plenty of new technologies. But it's not just about the new technologies. It's also about existing warehousing. How we're maintaining existing warehousing. Here at Next, we've got 17 warehouses around the UK, 10 of them predominantly based here in South Yorkshire. Different ages, probably up to 20 years difference in between them. It's not just about managing the automation, of course, we also have to pick up all of the facility side of the building as well. As we all know, the introduction of electric vehicles, we've had to sort out how do we charge these vehicles. We've had to think about the lighting levels within the warehousing, which obviously leads to the PV that sits on the roof of the building. But moving then on to the technology side of it, the majority of the 10 warehouses that I was referring to are fully automated. Different variations of, we don't put all of our eggs in one basket, which means that we don't go with one automation provider. We do our homework, we do our research, and dependent on the technology that we want, depends on the product that we're handling, will then depend on which automation provider that we go for.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And I think later on we'll go into a bit more detail about how you launch a warehouse, how you pick your suppliers, the good, the bad, and the ugly around that. But going back, I think a bit about your background and how we've ended up here. We've obviously started on the integrator side of things with the likes of Vanderlande and KNAPP, and now we're on the other side of the fence at the customer side. So I think firstly, what was it like being on the integrator side of things? What were your takeaways, and what's made you jump ship to the other side?
I think some people would see it as poacher turned gamekeeper. So I'm probably one of the worst customers now. But yes, no, you're right. I started many years ago with Vanderlande on the maintenance side of the organisation, and then later moved on to KNAPP, and was lucky enough to travel the world doing a lot of the KNAPP installations. But primarily my role as an automation provider was creating the after sale. So it was a case of, whilst I would be involved with some of the design aspects, it would be looking at it more from an after sale. So how would an end user actually organise that warehouse? So I suppose the easiest analogy that I can give you is, anybody could perhaps go out and buy a Formula One car, but actually nobody knows how to drive it and then thus maintain it. So my experience was mainly driven by how to create that service platform. And normally what that meant was that because the warehouses were larger and more complex, that they would have an on-site, what's referred to as a resident team. Then the interesting part of being a service provider was that how do you then justify the numbers and the labour of the number of skills that are kept on site? Because of course those salaries would be paid for by the end user. So it probably made my transition then. Certainly, if you'd have asked me while I was an automation provider, if you'd have asked me would I have ever gone to work for the customer, my probably answer would have been no. I was always very happy as an automation provider. But I saw an opportunity here at Next. I saw how much the business was growing. I saw the ambition of the directors, and it was something that I wanted to get on board with. So I suppose now what I've been able to do, I have a great established team, which has significantly grown. I've now been here for nearly 4.5 years. What's been interesting is we probably had a staffing level of about 380 staff when I joined the business. We're now nearly at 700 staff. So the interesting part of that journey isn't just the new shiny warehouses that are opening. It's actually about having a consistent approach across the existing warehouses. And I think trying to standardize as much as possible to create that environment that actually engineers want to work in and want to be part of. Almost creating an identity of what Next Engineering is all about.
Yeah, of course. And I think as well, just touching back on what you said there, with the knowledge you picked up coming from Vanderlande and KNAPP and knowing a lot of the trade secrets, how and what knowledge do you bring from that into the world that you're in now, being the end customer?
I suppose the one of the interesting parts is about how to, in essence, calculate manpower. It's about knowing, ultimately, with any sort of automation, you need to know that you can get the right person with the right skill to the right place at the right time, which is a very, very simple line for somebody to quote. But of course, in one way you could be totally overstaffed because you're then reliant on people just being available. But if you slimline too much, that you're then not providing. If I come back to what I was saying a moment ago, be it with the or being the automation provider or being the end customer, in actual fact, Next Engineering is a service to the next operation. So it is the fact that we're both employed by the same organisation. The principle behind it is almost very, very similar.
I think one thing I wanted to talk about, and you mentioned earlier before we were filming, is the new Fluke CMMS system, which is being rolled out. So how's that going to impact an engineer's day-to-day life?
Very much so. The standardization, I think, is something that's really, really important. We're actually sat in front of the banner to create an identity that as simple as whether an engineer works at a Durham Valley box warehouse, whether an engineer works at an Elmsall warehouse. We wanted to sort of create it so that that person would wear the same uniform, that they would be working under the same method statements and risk assessments, that they would be, in essence, carrying the same sort of toolbox. There's nothing worse than working in an engineering environment where we don't have the tools or we don't have the spare parts.
Of course.
But it's not just a case of flooding the system with tools and spare parts, it's having it all in an organisation. I made the reference a moment ago about the Formula One. But if you think about in the background of Formula One, you've got the engineers that you often see with the tool cabinets, with the foam inserts. And I think all of that becomes very, very important to not just getting engineers through the door, but it also raises the bar of the expectation.
Of course,
I think it feels that you're then part of a team. It makes you take care of and take care and pride of the work that obviously is being carried out. So that standardization is very, very important to me and to our organisation. The Fluke system is our vehicle of being able to manage that. The easiest way to word it is many years ago, people would have had Excel sheets and people would have created service schedules.
Yeah.
So all of that is electronic. All of that comes through on engineers' tablets. Any spare parts that are used are booked out through QR or barcodes, so they're automatically booked. It will create asset histories. We will then know through the time of that warehouse, through the life cycle of that warehouse, when we're getting to the point of seeing that we often refer to Trigger's broom that's had X amount of handles and X amount of heads. When is it at the point where actually it's better to replace rather than continue to maintain? So I do feel that whole standardization and asset history monitoring is hugely important.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's good to know. A reference for any international viewers that haven't seen Only Fools and Horses, I recommend you watch it. Just as a disclaimer there. But no, that's awesome. And going back to what you said, obviously how we were in contact, obviously doing the recruitment and helping you with all sites, and in particular E3, and going back to the engineers as well. So when it comes to a new site or extensions or expansions, again, without giving any trade secrets away, you've obviously got a date in mind of when the automation is going to come together, everything's going to come live, and this is the date where we want to be fully live or running at 50%, however you want to stagger it. At what point do you start to look at engineers? How do you go around that? Because obviously you can't just hire a full team of, 60 engineers and then nothing be running. On the flip side, you can't then have a full site running and only 2 engineers running around. So how do you find the balance and work around that?
It's a great question. I suppose a magic wand, but no, there's an element of a serious nature in there. I've been fortunate to be involved in many site go lives as a system integrator. I've seen it done very well, so I suppose I've picked up quite a lot of lessons along the way. Certainly you want to minimize your manpower during the ramp up period, because what are these people actually doing?
Of course.
But then on the flip side, these people who you have employed are hugely important of the installation stroke commissioning of the site. And that information is paramount for the moment that the system integrating team starts to step away and they're leaving site. And for want of a better word, we're left holding the baby. The more information that you could have had during that process, then better. You're absolutely right. Most people look at a new warehouse as a big bang go live. One day we pressing the big green button. But realistically, that's never the case. There's normally many tests on the way through. There's a science behind it where you can start to look at the amount of hours that are required to complete the maintenance. You can read through all of the O&M manuals. You can look at what the requirements would be, which would give you a generic number of the staff. But then you've also got to put into account what are the operational hours of the site. You've also got to consider the skill levels of the individuals, whether they're electricians, mechanics, etc. Of course, in a perfect world, we all want multi-skilled engineers. Of course, one person who can manage all of the process. But in the real world, we know that some people will have more IT knowledge, some people will have more electrical knowledge. So it's finding that balance, and I feel like I'm really talking around the question and answering the question, but I'm just trying to be quite delicate,
very diplomatic.
in the answer.
No, of course, no, that's awesome. That's appreciated. I'll take from that what I will. But no, I think in terms of the insight into how you launch a warehouse, that's been very beneficial. So appreciated on that very, very much. I think moving into life at Next, rather than, like we say, talking about the new warehouse. General day-to-day life, what it's like for an engineer, what it's like for the operations teams. Obviously, you touched on previously about what drew you to Next from working for an integrator. What brings an engineer to not necessarily to Elmsall 3, but to D1 and DVP and some of the other warehouses that we have in the area?
Yeah, I think my goal has always been that if I could bring an engineer in and see the workshops, see all of the documentation that sits behind it, and as we've spoke about a moment ago, all of the standardization of that documentation, I think it creates that ethic of knowing that everybody's making a difference. I genuinely feel that Next as an organisation is growing. I genuinely feel that as part of that, the team structure is growing. And the hardest thing is actually getting people to come in to witness it for themselves. I feel that the moment people can witness what it is that we're building, that they'll want to join the party. They'll want to get on the bus.
Of course.
But probably one of the hardest things is actually getting the people to come through the door in the first place. I don't think any of us are naive that when we drive up or down a motorway, we see sheds appearing left, right and centre. And it's very, very easy for people to be offering a salary of that's slightly more than the warehouse that's across the road. And people will jump because of the increased salary, but will that actually create the longitude that it is that you're looking for? Will it actually create the whole environment? When you start investing in the individuals, not just as we've discussed, the workshop and the documentation, but when you start to think about the training, so I think creating that whole environment that people want to be part of, then I think it starts to become a game changer. Yeah,
of course. I think as well, just I think echoing what you said there, I think when you walk around the warehouse and you see you've got all this amazing state-of-the-art automation, which is brilliant, but you touched on earlier, when you go back to the identity and the values, and it starts even from the little things, like you said about the uniform, about the workshop, and it's hard to say family feel, obviously being such the huge organisation that you are, but it almost gives that sense of being, a family feel business and having that real identity, which I think if you go and get another £2,000 up the road, you might not necessarily get, especially after tax. The UK has a very high tax system, I guess you could say, for international viewers. After tax, it probably doesn't work out too much anyway, but you jump ship for that, and then I think you lose a lot of like you said, the identity, the family feel, and I guess some of the camaraderie as well that comes with it. So no, I'd definitely agree there. And then that's before, like I said, you mentioned the automation, the standardization, some of the investments that you're making in terms of technology. So yeah, no, definitely, yeah. Well, obviously speaking earlier, like I said, about the standardization, about the identity, the benefits that a real engineer has and why they want to come in at Next. But give us a bit of an insight in terms of the stability, in terms of the longevity of a career at Next here, if there's other avenues that an engineer can go into in terms of team leader, management, projects. And lastly, a very long-winded question, the acquisition, it's common news Next, have partnered and acquired businesses, like huge businesses such as Gap, Fatface, Victoria's Secret, how that ties into the stability and the overall progression.
Oh, for sure. Next as a business is certainly, let's say, going places. If I look at the staff retention, we're certainly in a very, very good place, which sort of hopefully is meaning the right thing, that what we've just been discussing with the whole of the standardization. We feel very, very strong regarding the journey that people can choose to go on. We invest quite heavily. I mentioned a moment ago about training, ensuring that we keep up with training, whether that's with the original OEMs or whether that's facility style training. We offer things like future leaders programs to give people the progression. We've recently had a group come through the future leaders program, whereby at the end of that they've gone from an engineer to a team leader to a site maintenance manager, even up to what we would refer to as a technical support manager. So I do feel that the progression, and certainly, as I mentioned before as well, the numbers when the teams were a total of 350, whereas now it's up to 700.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, avenues open up and vacancies become available.
Mm-hmm.
It's always better for us to be bringing people in to the existing team and being able to flourish the existing team, rather than bringing managers in at the top. But each circumstance and situation obviously offers a different perspective, of course. But yeah, we certainly feel hugely, and we've got a strong team of staff here, who the majority of which have worked their way to the position rather than been brought in. I suppose I can probably say that I'm the exception to the rule. That I've come in as is.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, example, she's not on camera today, but Hayley, of course, she's been with the business for over 30 years, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a real case in point there. I think concluding, I'm going to catch you on your toes a little bit. A quick fire question, one word answer, or as small and condensed as possible. How has it been? How would you describe it's been launching E3 in particular? One word answer.
Challenging.
What's it? Challenging. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, that is all from the first episode of Automation Answers with Matt Winter, the head of engineering at Next. I think the next episode might come from Atlanta, Georgia. I'll be attending Modex with the team, so we'll hopefully get some more content coming. Matt, as always, appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, so thanks for letting me come up and film. And we'll see you very, very soon.